Hi and welcome to my 2024 reading journal flip through and the setup of my 2025 reading journal. Let's start with my 2024 reading journal. One of my goals in 2024 was to read more fantasy books, and I wanted my reading journal to reflect that. So I used this dragon themed reading journal. I definitely read more fantasy last year than in previous years, but I didn't read as many books with dragons as I had hoped. But fantasy is a genre I want to continue exploring, so hopefully there are more dragons in my future. So let's see what's in this journal. So there's the name page and the title page. As you can see, there's a lot of dragons in this journal. Contents, where I've added the names of the books I read. Forward, and then we get to the reading goals. My goal was to read 50 books. I read 77, so I easily surpassed that goal. I also wanted to fill out my book bingo, which I did pretty well, but I'll show you the results in a while. I wanted to annotate a book, which I did during Jane Austen July. I also wanted to read library books. I think I read 8 library books, which was 8 more than the previous year, so I'm counting that goal as accomplished. I took part in Jane Austen July, but not really in Victober. I decided to write a completely new novel in November, so I didn't have time to focus on reading in October. I did read one Victorian book, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, but I'm just going to say that I did not reach the Victober goal. I wanted to review all books. I did write some sort of review of all the books I read, at least in my reading journal, so that goal is accomplished. And lastly, I have a lot of books on my Kindle app, which I almost never use, so I wanted to read those ebooks. I did read a few of them, but I still have way too many waiting in my Kindle app. I also have writing and social media goals. I'll make a separate video on how my writing went in 2024, but I did reach all my social media goals, which included posting consistently on Instagram, starting a blog, and starting to post long-form videos on YouTube. Here's my shelfie of all the books I read in 2024. I don't have a color coding system. What I do is I color in the book with the color of the spine of the physical book, so this should look somewhat like what a real bookshelf would look like if I had all my read books next to each other. I didn't use the 5-star read spread at all, but I might go back and fill this in if I feel like it. The to be read spread I used mostly for a list of unread non-fiction books I had on my shelves, and I read all of these except 8. So those 8 will go to my next reading journal. New releases I didn't really use because I have too many unread books already, so I don't really keep up with new releases. The same thing happened with my wish list. It stayed mostly unused as well because I'm trying to get through my physical TBR first. And then there's the book bingo. As you can see, there were 3 items on the bingo that I didn't get to. I did read a memoir, book with an animal in the title or cover, graphic novel, BIPOC representation, ebook, romance, book with non-human characters, book with less than 200 pages, book with a red cover, a debut novel, book involving food. I DNF'd a book and annotated a book. I read an indie book, ancient retelling, first in a series, book with a map, a banned book, a middle grade book, a classic fantasy, and book with a one-word title. What I didn't read was science fiction, a book with disability representation, and a book with LGBT plus representation. Now, I did read The Midnight Library, which is sometimes categorized as science fiction, but to me it was more speculative fiction or fantasy, so I'm not counting that. I also did read books with disabled characters and LGBT plus characters, but they were not the main characters, so I'm not counting those either. I want the representation to be the main characters specifically. So these three items are definitely going to be my 2025 book bingo, and I'll try to do better this year. Next are two more reading challenges. I did pretty well with A to C. I'm missing only 5 letters. Book Voyage doesn't look so good, but I did visit several fantasy worlds. Then there's another spread for challenges, readathons and buddy reads. I did take part in Jane Austen July, so I added the prompts and the books I chose for those. And the last challenge before the monthly spreads is the book bracket. Lessons in Chemistry won my book of the year. And then come the monthly spreads with hopefuls, reading log, books purchased, and a monthly wrap-up. Some months I read more, like in February, and in March. But in April I only read 5 books and I only finished 3 of them. I also record some general thoughts on the month in the monthly wrap-up page, but I didn't always write a lot. Just whatever thoughts I happen to have of the month and the books I read. In some months I read more than I had expected, so I added those in the hopefuls page as well. And then there are the final stats for the year. I read 77 books in total, over 25,000 pages, and the average rating was a little over 4 stars. I also got 34 new books this year. And the page on the right has the book awards with my top 3 books of the year. My favorite book in 2024 was one of the first books I read, Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Carmus. It's a feminist historical fiction. The second best book was one of the last books I read in 2024, The Nightingale by Kristin Hanna. It's a historical fiction set in Nazi-occupied France during the Second World War. And the third was an indie debut novel of Love and Beer by Amanda Darcy. It's a modern retelling of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. I also have my 3 favorite characters of the year and a memorable quote. And then come the reviews of all the 77 books I read. I added drawings of the book covers because I didn't feel like printing them, but I think it's fun. They didn't all turn out great, but some of the drawings I really like, even though I'm not artistic at all. For some books I wrote quite a lot of thoughts, and for others not much at all. I usually write a longer review for fiction books than non-fiction books. And that's my 2024 reading journal. Now let's set up my 2025 reading journal. These are the reading journals I've made, so I have quite a selection to choose from. But since 2025 is Jane Austen's 250th birthday, I'm going for a Jane Austen reading journal. So let's set this up. Like the other reading journals I've made, this journal includes reading challenges, trackers and monthly spreads, and it has room for 100 reviews. What sets it apart is that it also includes bookish quotes from Austen's novels, so it makes a perfect reading journal for Austen's 250th birthday. I have a link in the description to all my reading journals, so check them out if you're like me and can't be bothered to draw every spread by hand and are looking for a ready-made reading journal instead. I don't usually decorate my journals, so I'm just writing my name on the first page. Then there's the index and foreword, and then we get to the 2025 reading goals. Like I said, I'm not huge into decorating, and like you saw with my 2024 reading journal, I didn't decorate it at all. I only drew the book covers in the review spreads. But this time I wanted to try and see if I enjoy decorating, so I have some stickers and washi tape and highlighters and different colored pens. It's not going to be hugely artistic at all. You're going to find a lot more beautiful journals on YouTube than mine, but I wanted to see if I enjoy the process. But mostly this is just going to be functional rather than pretty. So let's talk about my goals for 2025. This is a reading journal, but I use it to write my writing and social media goals as well, so that all my book related goals are in the same place. My social media is about the books I read and the books I write, so it makes sense to keep the social media goals here as well. But here are my reading goals for 2025. First, I want to read 50 books. This is a goal I've had for several years now. Some years I have just reached it, other years I go over the goal, but all in all, 50 books seems manageable to me. I want to fill out book bingo, which I'll show you in a minute. I want to read ebooks. I have no numerical goal for this, but I want to knock out at least a few books from my Kindle app. I want to read more library books. Last year I read 8 library books, so it would be nice to read more than that. I also want to take part in Jane Austen July. I had a blast last year, so I want to do it again this year. And since this year is Austen's 250th birthday, it's going to be extra special. I want to try a buddy read. I've never tried a buddy read before, so it would be interesting to do it this year. And lastly, I want to review all the books I read in my reading journal and also say something about them in my monthly reading recap videos on YouTube. For my social media goals, I want to post consistently on Instagram, YouTube and my blog. Ideally, I would want to upload at least 2 long-form videos every month on YouTube. This is my second video this month, so I'm on track with that goal. I'll talk about my writing goals more in a separate video. And finally, I'm just adding this pretty rose sticker here, and that's this spread done. I'm going to skip the shelfie for now and color it in off camera. You'll see it in the final flip through. I didn't do anything to the 5-star read spread either and moved to the to be read spread, where I'm adding the still unread non-fiction books from my 2024 reading journal. There's actually 2 fiction books there as well: Shakespeare's complete works, which I have read as a translation, and Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, which I've also read as an abridged translation. The English versions are waiting for the right time. I'm going to add more books to this spread later, but for now let's move on. I'm skipping new releases and wishlist and start filling out the book bingo. There are 25 squares in this book bingo card, and hopefully by the end of the year I filled the bingo out completely. Here's what I have this year. I want to read ebook, romance, more than 600 pages, banned book, Jane Austen retelling, classic, library book, disability representation, children's book, book with a prologue, fantasy, person on a cover, white cover, LGBT plus representation, duology, main character with a pet, sci-fi, debut novel, book with magic, audiobook, historical fiction, short story, BIPOC representation, shy main character, and indie book. If you're looking for ideas for a book bingo, I have a blog post that I will link in the description. I'm skipping the other challenges for now and moving on to the book bracket. I'm just experimenting with using washi tape here. Not as easy as some people make it look like. I think I ripped the page here a bit. Oops. For my January cover page, I'm adding these gorgeous snowflake stickers. And then it's time to set up my January hopefuls. I'm using a 3 by 2 cm piece of cardstock as my guide, and then draw it again with a pen. I'm noting the total number of pages the book has, how many pages my goal is to read, and how many pages I actually read. This makes it easier to count how many pages I've read each month and how many pages I have left of a book if I need to continue it the next month. So my goal in January is to read 4 books. I'm planning to finish 2 of them, The Power by Naomi Alderman and The Second Sex Part 1 by Simone de Beauvoir. And I want to start 2 books that are finished in February. A Finnish historical novel Hajustentekijän tytär by Kaisa Åkerman and Caraval by Stephanie Garber. So that's the setup of my 2024 reading journal. I'll show you the flip through now. In the goals page, I added some shadowing to the heading with a highlighter, and I colored in my shelfie and added a few cute plant stickers. I might add more in the future, but I want to see how this page is going to look like with the colored in box. I don't want it to look too cluttered. I added a bit of decoration to the book bingo page as well. And that's it. That's my 2025 reading journal all set up and ready to go. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and I'll see you in my next video.